Okay, so what we're going to start with now is attention and how attention works. So the roles in attention, some information processing theory, the brain, and then can we explain all of attention? So a little bit on how we can focus on one thing over another. So one of the big problems in studying attention is that the definition is difficult. You wouldn't think that would be hard, but everybody uses a slightly different definition, and getting people to agree, even when they're in the same room, is difficult. So just a general definition for you is that it's the process, so going back to information processing theory from chapter 1, that enhances some information and inhibits, which means just blocks out other information. So that allows us to think about some things for further processing and ignore other things that we don't want to process. So we're going to start with when attention sucks. So the failures of selection. How do you miss things in your visual field? How do you not be able to ignore? That sort of thing. So we're going to talk about when we're bad. And then we'll finish with when we're good, so to end on a high note. The successes in attention when we're really good at focusing on one thing over another. So failures of selection happen in space, so that's your visual field, all the things around you. In time, which is still kind of a visual event, but talking about how things change across time, where that limitation comes in, and then how we have problems with that sort of interpretation. Okay, so starting with failure of selection in space. So when we miss something, how do we know what we've missed? Because we've missed it, right? So it's kind of circular. And that happens a lot when you are presented a lot of information at once. So people are talking to you, you're at a noisy restaurant, you're at a party, and all these people are talking, you're trying to focus on just your friend, but you're having trouble with it. So that's a failure of selection in space. It can also happen across time, and time will be the next module video. And really this is the best section because you talk about change blindness. So Dan Simons is like the man when it comes to change blindness research. His studies are so well cited. If you search Dan Simons, you'll find his cool website. He has a really neat book called The Invisible Gorilla about missing things in your visual field. So one of the things that they did was they had someone stop somebody on campus and ask them for directions. So where is Freddie? Or where is University Hall? Questions I get asked that I don't know the answer to. And then what happened was, like candid camera style, somebody came walking through with a giant table or door. And then the person who had asked the person on campus, hey, where's this building? They switched them out. And so the goal was to see if people could notice that the person they've been talking to turned into another person, and they don't. And so that's called change blindness. It's missing a big change in our visual field. And so that happens in movies. If you go to imdb.com, you can find continuity errors, where they talk about how movies, when they switch from one scene to the next, don't keep the same objects in the room. The most famous case is Pretty Woman. In one scene, Julia Roberts is holding a pancake, and it flips to Richard Gere. It flips back to Julia Roberts. She's holding a croissant. Flips back again. She's holding something else. So people have noticed these, and so there's big lists online about problems with continuity across the scenes. But we don't often catch those because of change blindness. So, how big? Oh goodness, this is the same slide. Let's just keep going then. How big can that effect be? Quite large. So why? We selectively attend to information in our visual field, right? That's the whole point of attention, and we're ignoring the rest of the information. And so what are we paying attention to? Okay, it's called central interest information. Okay, so what is that? Central interest information is governed by top-down goals. So our goals of whatever we're doing. So if we're talking to a friend at a restaurant, it's to pay attention to them and keep that conversation going. If we're at a party, it might be to look for our friend and we're trying to find them. If you're driving down the road, it's to not hit anybody. But sometimes bottom-up information can break through. So a loud noise will capture your attention. Curse words, your name, and the word fire especially will capture your attention. So we'll miss these visual changes because they're not part of central interest information. So they're not what we're currently focusing on the most. All right, so one thing you can do with change blindness is if you're on a PC and not a fancy Mac, if you mouse over these areas, you will get little flips in the picture, so it'll change back and forth, and you can see if you can spot the change. And I also have this as part of the experiment you can do for the section, and you'll get to look at some of these because the video on my end doesn't work. And what happens is in one of these pictures, the piece that's changing when it flips back and forth is not important, and so it takes you about 16 flips back and forth before you finally notice what it is. And the other one, it is something where it's very important in the scene, and so it only takes you about 4 flips back and forth to find the piece that's changing. So there's a big difference between the central interest information and the sort of other stuff going on in the background. And really, how does that happen? Well, what's happening is that you are focused on one thing usually when this happens. So focused attention, I'm doing one thing at a time. Or then there's cases of divided attention where you're doing more than one thing at a time. I think in a world full of smartphones and all these things going on, most of the time we're doing a divided attention task. You might study with your with the music on or the TV on. You might be walking down the street, texting on your phone, whatever. And so when we live life in a divided attention task, we don't realize what we're missing because, again, we're not paying attention by doing more than one thing at a time. Okay, so focused attention task, one thing at a time. Divided attention task, more than one thing at a time. So here's the story. They had people that were in scene A here counting the number of hand claps. So they're playing like patty cake. And then scene B here, they're counting the number of basketball passes or jumps. And then in C, all the way here on the right, they were having people do both. So if you got A or B, you were doing a focused attention task. If you got C, you were doing a divided attention task. People were really good at A and B, terrible at C. Almost impossible to do. You either got one of them really well and did poorly on the counting, or you just were terrible at the whole thing. So divided attention tasks are bad. Okay. All right, computer. What it is doing today. All right. Almost there. Oh, okay, that was the end.